Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe. Forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur or complain beneath a chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my Master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and O thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I my trust betray, I shall forever die. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God. Good evening. Let's edify one another tonight, shall we? Indeed, we are on a special edition. Instead of evening edification as normal, we are doing our preempted study to show ourselves approved. The class that should have happened at 5:30 Central Standard, 6:30 Eastern, but because of scheduling conflicts with the Memorial Day schedules and stuff going around, we moved it to this time slot. And so we pick up our study to show ourselves approved. Hello, Sam. Hello, CJ. Hello, O'Shea. Workmen that need not be ashamed, handling aright the word of truth, for that's exactly what we are trying to do. Be approved unto God, not unto man. So as the verse actually says, which I misquoted it just a minute ago, study to show yourselves approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, handling right the word of truth. You see how easy it is to mishandle the word of truth if you leave out just a word or two. We are in beginning. I should say, this course of study is beginning at the beginning, lessons from Genesis, and I want to begin this particular lesson 37, I think it is, by thanking CJ for stepping in at short notice yesterday, or last week rather. Yesterday seems like yesterday, and let's see here, and yeah, so thank you for doing that, CJ. I'm just going to go over a brief review. Yeah, I'm totally out of it, discombobulated. Trying to find a certain spot. Yes, okay, here it is. Found it. ... Okay, so CJ and Alicia have done tagged. Let's get right into it. We're going to begin with a brief review, as brief as possible. Hello, Sheila. And just pick up actually a few things that I wanted to bring out that CJ didn't, maybe perhaps answer a question that was asked, that Maureen asked last time, that CJ didn't know. And so we'll just throw this one out there for free. All right, let's get to it. The first point that I wanted to bring up, as Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, is that he's standing there, he's talking to them. He said, "I'm Joseph, your brother." And he has already told them that that God has meant what they did for good. They thought it was evil, or they thought, hey, this was their own devising, but it was, and they're standing there thinking, oh no, what are we going to do now? This is crazy. Here it is, as if a spirit, God, here's Joseph. And he says, don't worry about it. God, he's meant this. He sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, to save your lives by a great deliverance. Verse 7. And he comes down. Behold, your eyes see, in the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. Previously, Joseph has been speaking to them through an interpreter. They thought he was an Egyptian because he acted like an Egyptian. He had shaved his head. He looked like an Egyptian because he was, second to Pharaoh. So he dressed like an Egyptian, and he acted like an Egyptian, and he spoke with an interpreter to them like an Egyptian would. And well, Sam, we're all paying one way or the other. Anyway, he says to them, "Hello, Reba. Good to see you. Thank you, by the way, for tagging Carol." He says, "You see that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you." I'm not speaking with an interpreter anymore. Let me see if I can find that. It would take me a little bit to. Maybe it wouldn't. Genesis 42 and verse 23. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. So all this time, all this interaction that they have had with each other, or with Joseph, has been through an interpreter. And so now he says, you are seeing that it's my mouth moving, my mouth that is speaking to you. So you know that I am speaking to you in the Hebrew tongue. I am speaking to you. I am mentioning my brother Benjamin. I am mentioning all of this. And I'm not a ghost. I'm real. And so that's proof to them that he is who he is, says he is. He's speaking facts that would only be known to Joseph. And so I wanted to point that one out. My next one, of course, Maureen asked, she said, I wonder if the resemblance was unmistakable between Joseph and Benjamin. And the answer to that is no. If it was unmistakable, then they would have known Joseph immediately upon seeing him, because he would look too much like Benjamin. Sam, it's called modulating my voice, probably, but I'll try. I'll redo that audio real quick. Hang on a minute.
No, it's going loud as in distortion, and then it's back to normal.
Now, the question is this any better?
We shall see.
Let me refresh my page a little bit since I did that. How about now? We shall find out. Okay. CJ's gone silent on me.
It's good right now.
Alrighty then. All right. So, now the next thing I wanted to put forth, CJ, when you mentioned that the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, I wanted to mention this one fact, and that is Joseph is second in command of all of Egypt. He is what we would term the Grand Vizier. Actually, that's what they would call him. We would term him as vice president in our common vernacular today. or prime minister, depending upon which country you're in. He was second in command. As such, his house was in the palace complex. Not that it was in the palace, but in the palace complex. What that means is that you have your palace, and then you have houses of notable or noble persons, of his counselors and stuff. You also have the barracks for the army, and you have, the quarters for servants and things like that. This would all make up the palace complex, and would usually, as we went into the medieval times, would be surrounded by a wall. And even in this time, day and age, there were walls around to protect the king. Just not as perhaps the castle-like aspect of what you and I would think of in terms of the medieval type. And so when you hear of Joseph crying so loud, where is that? I think we're going back up just a hair. When he couldn't contain himself any longer. And there it is. He wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. It is because he was within the palace complex. And let's face it, servants gossip like you wouldn't believe. But also because walls have ears. In those particular day and age. Egypt being the type of country it is, and with his house being where it was, he wasn't far from the Pharaoh. And so his cries literally would have been heard within the temple, or rather, the palace. And the servants would know immediately what he was crying about, and his servants would be talking to the Pharaoh's servants, and of course news would get all over. So just wanted to bring that out. Really cool little things, little details that we learn about in all of this, about the day-to-day living. Let me say, though, that they didn't have that their walls weren't as paper thin as the Japanese walls, which were literally made of paper. Okay, and so the fame of what the fact that Joseph and Joseph's brothers were come down to Egypt, didn't take long to be spread to Pharaoh's house, because they're in the same complex. And like I said before, servants gossip. And it's no wonder, because the only way for you to get ahead in position in those days and age was to know everybody else's business and to make use of it in political ways. Now, this, of course, pleased Pharaoh, etc. Now let's jump down to verse 26. The next thing, when Joseph's brothers came to Jacob, and they tell him that Jacob is alive. Okay, don't dawdle. It's getting dark. And they come into, they tell him, he says, Joseph's yet alive. He's governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. The language here is indicative of Jacob having a stroke or a heart attack. This is not just something, okay, well, I don't believe you, and him refusing to believe them. His heart fainted. His heart stopped. How would you feel if you were confronted with the fact that your son, who has been gone and dead for 20 years, suddenly reappeared right in front of you? Let's just think of it in this terms. Now, of course, Joseph isn't right in front of him, but the idea is it shocked him so much that he literally fainted. His heart stopped. And the language is specific in that regard. His heart fainted. Looking at the word pug, Hebrew 6313, it means to be sluggish, to cease, be feeble. And so Jacob literally had, his heart literally stopped. I mean, it basically, he had either a stroke or a heart attack. I'm going to go with probably a heart attack, but either way, he fainted. He didn't believe them. But CJ was absolutely correct in the fact that when he recovered and he saw all that Joseph had sent, his spirit, the spirit which had been dead for 20 years, the spirit that had ceased to live because his son was dead, revived. And the proof was right there in front of his face. My son is yet alive. Look at all this stuff. I can't believe all this stuff is here. And okay, I'll go and see him. Because there's no other explanation for why they would suddenly have all of this bounty. And so his spirit came back alive. I think CJ, refresh my memory, CJ. I think you mentioned that in your lesson.
Yeah, I connected that back with the contrast of when Jacob first was confronted with the lie, he could not be comforted.
Right.
So now it's almost if we see how connected Jacob was with Joseph. I mean, it was like his spirit revived, There was life in him knowing that his son was alive and well. So a deep connection between Jacob and Joseph in that sense.
Yes, and that I think is because Joseph was the firstborn of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. We see how much Jacob loved Joseph. I mean, the coat of many colors, etc., etc. But so yes, I believe there was that deep connection there. And I just wanted to hit one more time that this aspect is not connected with this aspect. They're not the same. The heart fainting is the heart being sluggish, i.e., either a stroke or a heart attack. Whereas the spirit reviving deals with his attitude, his joy, his connection, like CJ was saying, with Joseph. This man had been grieving the loss and just totally distant, if you will, as if he was dead. with his son Joseph. And now he has been brought back to life.
I also think of the connection with Luke 15 when the prodigal son leaves his father and comes back. The father says, "This my son was dead and he was alive forevermore."
That's a very good correlation. I like that. Thank you, CJ. O'Shea says it was his reason to continue living. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I should shut up more. But even when in the next chapter, when they reunite, you see Jacob saying, "Okay, now I can die because
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you."
Good segue, because we're going to go into the next chapter now. And this one here, Joseph is dreaming, or rather, Jacob is receiving his vision from God on his way out of Canaan again. Yes, Sam, exactly. He had a new spring in his step. It's interesting because we see God appearing to Jacob as Jacob left Israel or Canaan, headed for Padan Aram. And he says, I will be with you, I will go with you. And here, God is appearing to Jacob again as Jacob is preparing to leave Canaan. And God is saying again, I'm going to go with you. He says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I will go down with you into Egypt. I will also bring you up again. And he says here, Joseph shall put his hand upon your eyes. This does two things to Jacob. First, it tells him, indeed, Joseph is alive, and you're going to see him. But it also says a second thing, and that is, you are going to die down there in the presence of Joseph. When we look at the idea of a person putting their hand on another person's eyes, we always see the movie idea, the movie scene where a person has died and the hero lays his hand and closes the person's eyes for the last time. And this is kind of the imagery that you're seeing here. Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. You are going to die down there. But he has this assurance that while he's down in Egypt, God is going to make of him a great nation. And his descendants will be coming up again. And so I wanted to hit that one there. Maybe something you hadn't thought of. Now, jumping down to verse 34. When Joseph coaches them and says that you shall say thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from your youth, even until now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. CJ did a really good job of showing that this is where the delineation, the demarcation, if you will, the division between Israel and Egypt occurs. Because from that point in time, Israel was separated from Egypt. What is significant about this, hello, Sister T, is that it is not done through the law, as in what happened later is that there was God put a separation between Israel and everybody else, i.e. the Jew and the Gentile. This was because the Egyptians abhorred shepherds so much that anyone who was tied to the shepherd was an abomination, or to the sheep, rather. Every shepherd is an abomination. And Joseph says that you are to tell them that you are and your fathers have been shepherds for generations because a shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Joseph says this to put that separation between Israel and Egypt. And we can only surmise from this that this was God's doing. CJ made a point about Goshen being a very fertile land. It was the land that was in the delta or the headwaters of the Nile. And so it received plenty of rain or plenty of water. It was the best place for sheep. I know that there's a lot of people that claim to be shepherds, and they want to say that sheep require arid places and like to have sparse grass and stuff. No, they really don't. Sheep love to eat just as much as anything else on this land. And so while they typically inhabit, there are different breeds that inhabit rocky, craggy places. Most of the sheep that people keep or the domestic sheep are pasture. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. As we go through that song, he leadeth me through green pastures. I guess it's, or however that is. I'm totally drawing a blank on that, but the imagery. The Lord gives me good green pasture for me to pasture in. Well, Goshen was that pasture in the land of Egypt. And Joseph built that separation in. And that is what made it easier come the time of Moses for Israel to be separate, but also for Israel to leave without having a whole lot of trouble waiting for everybody to gather from all over the whole of Egypt. Shea says, when I think of sheep, the number one people or place I picture them is in the British or Irish places and those are moist, foggy places. I also think of Portugal or over here, even in the United States, where there was a great big battle or fight between farmers and shepherds. All right. All creatures, great and small, is what you're thinking of. All right. So that brings us over here to 47, where CJ was talking, and my favorite. This one, CJ didn't really hit on, so I'm going to hit on it. He did mention it, but Jacob's talking to Pharaoh and blesses him, and Pharaoh looks at him and says, "How old art thou?" And I always get a kick out of this. Jacob's 130 years old, and he looks like it. How would you look if you were 130 years old? Well, Pharaoh looks at him, and you can just see a young man on the throne and going, "How old are you?" For 20 years, this man has thought that his son was dead. It weighed on him. He was gray-haired for the last 20 of the 130 years that he's been alive. He's been in trouble for more years than he can count. What with his brother wanting to kill him and him having to run away, the trouble that his father-in-law gave him, switching his pay how many times? 10 times in 6 years? Then having to up and leave it and run away in the middle of the night from his father, as it were. Coming back and facing his brother again and in fear of his brother and however many men that it was that his brother brought with him. You see, this man, Jacob, has been in trouble. So when he says, the days of my pilgrimage are 130 years, few and evil have been the years of my life. and have not attained in the days of the life of my father in the days of their pilgrimage. Pharaoh sees this very old man, one who is stoop-shouldered, one who is gray-haired and careworn. No, Sister T, this is not. Remember, there was 4 generations, roughly 420 years between Abraham and Moses. And so there's roughly, well, actually, there's more than that. There's 400 years, I believe, from the time that they go down into Egypt and the time they come out, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and look at that again. But I think it is that God says that your descendants are going to go down into Egypt, and 400 and some years later, I shall return, I shall bring them out again. So from the time that they go down, there's 400 years, and that means there's there's many different pharaohs that pass through the throne, or pass over the throne, between Joseph and Moses. That's fine. Pharaoh is just a name. It would be like king to us. That's why you have Pharaoh Ramses. You have Pharaoh Amenhotep. You have, Pharaoh Tutankhamun, and others as well. Okay, so those are, I think that's about all I had. It was just my favorite right there. Jacob, how old are you? How old are you? So let's get into the last 3 chapters. Are there any other questions? 15:13 is the prophecy. Thank you, CJ. God says to Abraham, he says, and he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve, will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So they're, 400 years after they go in, they're going to serve them for 400 years. Before they come out. Yes, CJ is here in the background with me. So, all right. So those are just the ones that I wanted to hit. I want to again say thank you to CJ for his jumping in and on short notice filling in for me. Let's get down to business. Genesis 48. Someone comes to Joseph and tells him, your father is sick. Remember, again, keep in mind the fact that God has told Jacob that Joseph is going to put his hand on his eyes. But Jacob's sick. So Joseph takes his son, Manasseh and Ephraim. Remember, Manasseh is firstborn, Ephraim is secondborn. However, we always refer to them as Ephraim and Manasseh because of what happens in this chapter. So a servant tells Jacob, hey, your son Joseph comes. And so Israel strengthens himself, sits up on the bed. Joseph comes in. Joseph comes in. Jacob says to him, God appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he says, I will make thee a multitude of people and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And thy issue, which thou begettest after them, shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. So basically, Jacob is saying, I'm going to take Ephraim and Manasseh and essentially adopt them. They're going to take your spot, get your inheritance. your part of my inheritance, or my substance rather. And part of this is because, well, what need does Jacob have for, or Joseph have for it? He's second in command in Egypt. He has everything. And yet he still gets a portion of Jacob's as firstborn of Rachel. So then, Jacob says, I'm going to take these two sons of yours. And you have any other sons? They're yours. They can take your inheritance, whatever you have here, whatever else you get. But Ephraim and Manasseh are mine. So then he sees Ephraim and Manasseh. He says, who are these? Can we tell that Jacob is a little bit sick? He's kind of a little bit forgetful. And Joseph says, they're my sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he said, and so Jacob says, bring them unto me and I will bless them. So Jacob's eyes are almost blind, almost completely gone. They're dim for age, so that he couldn't see. So I guess he is blind, just like Isaac was when Jacob stole the blessing from out from underneath Esau. And so Joseph brings them near, and Jacob kisses them, embraces them, and then he again goes and gets colloquial, or lacoic, anyway, however they say that. He gets to talking again. He said, I'd not thought to see your face. Lo, God has showed me and thy seed. And so then Joseph brings them out from between his knees down. These are young men. These are young lads, I should say. Joseph hasn't been out. These sons have been born unto him. Oh, what is it? Somewhere within the last 9 plus years, because Joseph has only been, only began to be the second in command after, during the 7 years of plenty. And when Joseph met his brothers and told them to bring Jacob down, I'm going to put that here. He says, bring Jacob and the rest of the family down because there are still 5 years of famine left. And CJ did another wonderful job of talking about that and how desperate times got, and made mention of the fact that, that was during this time of famine was when, or maybe he didn't. Anyway, when Pharaoh ended up owning all the land of Egypt, every acre of land, every inch of land in Egypt, except for the land that belonged to the priests, Pharaoh ended up owning. And not only did he end up owning all the land, but he ended up owning all the Egyptians. So you hit on some of that. Joseph was a wise man, but boy, am I glad we don't live under him. I kind of like my land. Thanks, Joseph. I'll keep it. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees and bows himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left, Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right. Because remember, the right hand is the sign of strength. It is the sign of, or it is the side of not just strength, but also the side of air, of the air. So, yeah, I can't remember if you hit on the actual owning of everybody and everything. I know you were hitting on how desperate the times were. I'd have to go back and watch the end of the last week's stream. Manasseh, so he set the firstborn toward Israel's right hand, so that Jacob would bless Manasseh first, because Manasseh was the firstborn. And Israel, however, had different ideas. So instead of stretching out his hand and placing it on Manasseh's head, he instead moves it over and places it on Ephraim's head. And so then his left hand had to cross and put his left hand on Manasseh's head. And he guided his hands wittingly. So even though he couldn't see, he knew exactly where his hands were going to go. Even though Manasseh was the firstborn, Ephraim got the blessing of Jacob, the primary blessing. So he blesses Joseph and says, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So this displeased Joseph, because Joseph is like, no, you have your hand on Ephraim, right hand on Ephraim, and your left on Manasseh, and it needs to be the other way around. And Jacob's like, nah, I know what I did. And Jacob said, no, I know what I did. He also should become a people. He shall be great, but truly Ephraim's going to be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Now, Manasseh had probably the bigger share of the land on the eastern side of the Jordan, as we would come to find out later. But Ephraim actually was, no, it was the half tribe of Manasseh, wasn't it? Ephraim had the bigger land in the main course on the western side. Okay. Different story, Teresa. Mm-hmm. So, so he blessed them, and he said, in thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he said Ephraim before Manasseh. And that's the reason why we always name it Ephraim and Manasseh, not Manasseh and Ephraim. And it's not because of alphabetical order, but that's the reason right there. Ephraim and Manasseh, because Ephraim came first because Jacob said it was Ephraim first. So Jacob says, okay, I'm going to die. God be with you. Bring you again into the land of your fathers, but bury me there. Do not bury me here. Whoops, I'm jumping ahead of myself. He says to Joseph, he says, I've given you one portion above your brethren, because now he has Ephraim and Manasseh, remember? Any questions over 48? See, Joseph's not the only prophet, by the way. Jacob says, I die, but God shall be with you and bring you again into the land of your fathers. That one, Sister T, was Jacob. Isaac was blind. Jacob, Rebecca had Jacob trick Isaac for the blessing. This is Jacob being blind, and Rachel's dead, long before this account. So, let's see if we can jump through 2 chapters in about 10 minutes or a little bit more, because I'm bound and determined we're going to end Genesis tonight. So CJ can pick up next week in his new quarters, which he'll get to tell you about at the end of this class. So Genesis 49, let's keep moving. Jacob calls his other sons, all of his sons, and he says, come here, I'm going to die. It's time to get together. I want you to hear all of this. And this chapter is very important because this is where the blessings occur. Now, let's go through this a little bit, a little bit slower, one at a time, because I don't want you to miss anything. Reuben, you are my firstborn, but and the beginning, my might and the beginning of my strength. He was the firstborn, and after him came the other 11 sons, plus all the daughters. However, Reuben does not get the blessing. He doesn't get the right of the firstborn because Reuben's unstable. You will not excel. You went up to your father's bed and defiledst it. He went up to my couch. What are you talking about, Jacob? Remember that after the death of Rachel, Reuben went in. Oh, come on. Oops, I just misspelled Reuben. Reuben went in to Bilhah. So we have, Rachel died in 35 verse 19 and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Jacob sets the pillar up. Now, Israel journeyed, spread his tent beyond the tower of Adar. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. That's Rachel's maidservant. That's the one that had 2 of his brothers. And so this is where he defiled his father's bed. That is a good point, CJ. There is a theme of the younger serving the older all throughout the books and throughout the Bible. Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau. But Isaac over Ishmael, that one's kind of an iffy because Isaac was the firstborn. Isaac was the trueborn. But I do get your point. So that is a good point. So anyway, this is where Reuben went in and defiled Bilhah's, defiled Jacob's bed, and that's why he does not get the right of the firstborn, and he doesn't get the blessing. So, 49, not 48. Now, Simeon and Levi, they would come next. But there's a problem with them. Simeon and Levi are the ones that are instruments of cruelty because they went and completely wiped off the map the city of Shechem. Remember the issue with Dinah? Come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Hamor was willing to wed Dinah and make right his sin. Or was it Shechem? I forget now which one, whether it was Hamor, whether Hamor was the father or the son, but Shechem was the city, and one of those two. And they, in their anger, went and killed the entire city, taking captive the women and the children. And so they didn't get blessed. And in fact, Simeon had one of the smallest portions in the division of the land. And he was actually contained within Judah. Judah then, as the fourth son, he was the lion. In a lot of ways, it was Reuben who saved Joseph. Reuben was the instrument of God in this case, or not Reuben. Judah was the instrument of God in this case, because Judah was the one that proposed to sell Joseph into slavery, thus moving Joseph from Canaan into Egypt, and thus to that position of power ultimately, to where he could preserve the entirety of the Israel nation. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. This is a prophecy regarding both David and ultimately Jesus. The scepter, of course, is denoting the kingship, the rulership, as is the lawgiver. And David was a direct descendant of Judah, as was Jesus. And you can read about that genealogy in Matthew chapter 2, or 1 rather, Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 3, I believe it is. Interesting about the binding the foal unto the vine and his ass colt unto the choice vine. Some people want to try to tie that to Jesus and the triumphant entry. But be that as it is, Judah gets the first blessing. Zebulun, dwelling in the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven for ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. I think we did, CJ. And in Jacob's blessing of this, we see a foreshadowing of the division of the land, as well as that, like that prophecy regarding Jesus and David. Issachar is a strong ass, crouching down between two burdens. He saw that the rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant under tribute. You don't hear much about Issachar. Of course, he is one of the 10 tribes that eventually did indeed become under tribute. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. He was the gateway into Israel. I think if I remember the division, Dan was at the far north, up there by Syria. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, and an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heel, so that his rider shall fall backward. Of course, it might have been down there next to Judah as well. There were 2 Dans, by the way. There was 1 tribe, but 2 cities known as Dan. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Out of Asher, and his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. That's why he had two parts. He also, it was, by the way, that received the first, I believe, the firstborn, because he was the firstborn of Rachel. Since the firstborn of Leah did not receive the blessing, the firstborn of Rachel did. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above. Do you see what we're given here? Right before all of his brothers, Jacob is bestowing the blessing upon Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel. The blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast, blessings of the womb. The blessing of thy father have prevailed above all the blessings of my progenitors, that is, my fathers, in other words, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brothers. Is 24 a reference to his brothers? I think you mean 23, and yes. Basically, the archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him is reference to all the troubles that he went through. And yes, the archers grieved him, shot at him, hated him, tried to tear him down, but they failed. That is true, Oshea, but Leah was the first wife. It doesn't matter the agreement. The actual practice or the actual act was Leah first. So her son, being first, would receive the blessing. And Moses deals with that in his law when he says that if you have two wives, you cannot disavow the son of the hated, even though, if the son of the hated is first, you cannot disavow him from his inheritance and his, but whereas what we have here in the case of Jacob and his sons is Reuben actually disqualified himself from the blessing because of what he did. And so therefore, for that reason alone, the blessing passed to Joseph. Does that make sense? The crime that Reuben committed was so heinous, so atrocious, terrible that that he disqualified himself from the blessing, from the right of the firstborn. Okay, 27. So Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. It's interesting. In other words, he says Benjamin is as unruly as a wolf. He's terrible. You ever tried to control a wolf? And I wonder, when you read this particular prophecy, this particular blessing or whatever, when you read this, There goes the washing machine's knocking. Somebody better let it in. Somebody better actually fix it. But anyhow, when you read this, think of the event in Judges where the priest is heading back to his home, and the city in Benjamin basically ends up abusing, well, not basically, he ends up abusing, the men of that city ends up abusing his concubine to the point of killing her. And then the entire tribe of Benjamin defends that city and its shame, its sin, rather than siding with God and his law. Benjamin was just like a wolf, wild and terrible. And he suffered for it. So then all of these, after all this, 12 tribes, the blessings, the last words for the 12 tribes, Jacob dies. They received their blessing. Some of it wasn't exactly a blessing, but they received him. And he charged them and said, I am to be gathered to my fathers. You go bury me in that cave that is in the field of Ephron, the Hittite. They all knew the cave. Many of them had seen it because most of them had all seen it because that's where Leah was buried. And so that's also kind of interesting. I never did figure out why he didn't bury Rachel there. But he didn't bury Rachel there. So instead of being buried with Rachel, he's buried with Leah and with his fathers. And there they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. So he says, I want to be buried there. So evidently Jacob had made some sort of a peace and had loved Leah in her own way. And he went and he commanded them to bury him there. And then he pulled up his feet into the bed, yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. Any questions over 49? Or comments? Okay, continuing on. Let's get to it, guys. How's my audio? Who?
It's been good.
Good. Who all's still here? I got Sam, I got O'Shea. Reba, you still with me? Teresa, how are you? Sheila, you still with me? Carol, how about you? Teresa's still with me. Sam's still with me. Good. I knew Sam was because he just made a comment not too long ago. All right. So, Joseph, of course, cries, weeps. Sheila's here. Good to see you. Good deal. And Joseph makes arrangements to have his father embalmed. And what we see here is another proof that the Bible is historically as well as scientifically accurate. For what we see is that, the physicians embalmed Israel. Now, they don't just embalm anybody. Many is the Egyptian documentary on the History Channel or wherever that will tell you that the embalmers only embalm those of royal blood or noble And of course, Joseph, being who he is, has access to that. And so they embalm Jacob, and it takes 40 days for them to do so. And again, historical documents, they have been able to show or find historical documents that from Egypt that have shown that it took 40 days for them to embalm a person. There were shorter processes prior to this, I believe, but also I believe there was also shorter processes, I believe, later on as embalming fell out of vogue. But 40 days were approximately how long it took for them to occur, to complete the embalming process. And the Egyptians then mourned for him 70 days. So you got the 40 days of embalming and then another 30 days on top of that of mourning. So then at the end of these days of mourning, Joseph speaks to Pharaoh, or actually to his house, to all the nobles, and says, hey, if I've found grace in your eyes, put a word in the ears of Pharaoh for me. My father made me swear to take him back to Canaan and bury him there. So speak to Pharaoh and request that I be allowed to go and bury my father in Canaan. And so Pharaoh says, yeah, go ahead, go do it. Just like he made you swear. That's pretty grand gesture of the Pharaoh. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. This was not a small company. This was not just some secondary class of citizens. This was the nobility. This was of the family of Pharaoh, paying their respects. So you have Pharaoh, the elders of his house. That means his family, whether it's his father or mother or grandfather or uncles and aunts, whatever. And then you have the elders of the land of Egypt. So you have counselors and, the wise people. And then all the house of Joseph and his brethren. Only those who needed to stay behind and care for the flocks were left in the land of Goshen. So this was a huge company, very great company. Chariots, horsemen, wagons, people. And so they get to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan. And there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And they do they're crying there for another 7 days. And Canaan, the inhabitants, they see this. They're like, whoa, this must have been some important person. And that's the reason why that particular place was called Abel Mitzrayim. And what we have here is Moses' commentary about the current city, current area during his day. And he traces back the reason why this place was called this. Just like when you have Lutz being called Bethel. Why was it called Bethel? Well, it was called Bethel because that's where God appeared unto Jacob. But it was called Lutz all the way up until the time that, Israel, the nation, came back and took it. It was called Bethel because of Jacob, and all of Israel knew it as Bethel, but it was called Lutz in between the time that, during the time that Israel was not in the land of Canaan. Well, here we have the threshing floor of Atad coming to be called Abel Mitzrayim. Think of this, a huge host of people encamped at this threshing floor. What are you going to have there? Why, the perfect spot for a city. Now that it's been packed down for 7 days by a whole host of people. Anyhow, so Jacob's sons did to him according as he commanded them. For his sons then carried him on into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought. And Joseph then returns to Egypt, he, his brethren, and all that had went up with him. And life returns to normal. But here's a problem. Joseph's brethren look at each other and they're like, Dad's gone. What are we going to do? You know, Dad's not here to temper Joseph, and perhaps Joseph being second in command, you know, maybe he's going to get revenge on us now because Dad's gone. Joseph will peradventure, perhaps, hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. In spite of repeated attempts by Joseph to reassure them and tell them, don't worry about this. It's all forgiven. Water under the bridge. God meant this for good. Don't worry about it. There's nothing to forgive. You guys thought it was for evil, but God meant it for good. I'm happy. I'm content here. They still were fearful that Joseph had evil intentions underneath all of that good. And a lot of it is that when, just like them, when we get we at times read ourselves into situations. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we will read our good intentions onto situations that where a person really meant evil. Or vice versa. Perhaps we might have meant, perhaps we would do something that was spiteful and wicked. And we then turn around and believe that a person thinks that way. Well, I know that so-and-so doesn't like me, that they were tattling on me, that they're talking about me, bad about me behind my back. I know they would, or they are, because it's what I would do. And so they're just as human as you and I. We may not like to think about that, but that's what happens. And yes, O'Shea, they still felt very guilty. We know they felt very guilty about it. And I do agree. They could not forgive themselves, or they hadn't been able to forgive themselves. And so what they do is the apple didn't fall far from the tree here. They make up a lie. Your father did command before he died, saying, you need to say to Joseph, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. If Jacob said that, we have no record of it. But we know historically that they were prone to lying, just because of what they did in regard to Joseph. And so there's a movie I really like, and maybe when CJ comes, we'll be able to, this October, he just got a big grin on his face. When CJ comes this October, we'll get to show it to him. It's called Rigoletto, and it's produced by, or it's at least it was sold by Feature Films for Families. And in it, the main focus, or the secondary focus, tells the heroine of the movie that a lie is like a big beast. I believe he says, or either that or a big pit. And you tell one, and then you have to tell another, and then another to keep covering it up until finally it gobbles up its creator. And what we see here is that coming kind of to true. In order to protect themselves, they ended up having to, lie or to seek to prevent this evil from happening, seek to prevent Joseph from taking out vengeance upon him. And Joseph was like distraught. Joseph wept when they spake unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. Thank you. And Joseph says, I told you, don't fear. Am I in the place of God? It's not my place. That brings us to Romans chapter 12. I'm going to put this back up here because I'm done up there. Recompense to no man evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men, as if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And Joseph lived that philosophy out. Am I in the place of God? It's not my place to revenge. It's not my place to judge. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now, therefore, fear ye not. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. It took a lot of reassuring. Joseph was very patient with his brothers. He was very understanding, and he was very forgiving. Gotcha! And Joseph dwelled in Egypt, and he and his father's house, and he lived to be 110 years. Remember, he was 17 years old when he went down to Shechem looking for his brethren. And then he was subsequently sold into slavery. He lived there for approximately 20 years in slavery. So that means he would have been 37 when the famine started and began. And he said then for another additional 2 years, so approximately 39, roughly 37 to 39, before he saw his brothers and his father. Finally, his father. And he lived to be 110. So going off of, 37 to 110, that's quite a long life. He saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, the children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. So he sees Ephraim's he sees Ephraim's great-grandchildren. His great-great-grandchildren. And he sees the grandchildren of Manasseh. And then he dies. But he gives them this prophecy: I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Take my bones with you. So he died. And by the way, he didn't just say, take them with you. He took an oath out of them. They made a solemn oath. They swore to take his bones with them. Then they embalmed him, and he was put into a coffin in Egypt. So, Joseph died, 110 years old, lived a long, full life, not all of it in famine, but definitely a life that many, millions owed their life to. Any questions or comments over chapter 50 or over the entirety of the book of Genesis as we wrap up this study?
If anybody had a motivation to have an excuse to hold a grudge, it would be Joseph. You know, we really see what was truly in Joseph's heart, and it wasn't just because Jacob was there watching. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even before Jacob comes, he's nice, and then after Jacob's death, he's like, I meant what I said, guys.
Right.
Meant it for evil, God meant it for good. So the character of Joseph just shines brightly here at the end of Genesis.
And that was a character that began way before he went to Egypt. It was refined while he was in Egypt through the troubles and tribulations that he endured, but it was begun before he went to Egypt. and that's part of the reason why Jacob loved it. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to let CJ I'm going to give him some time to speak of his next class, of the next class beginning next Monday. So, CJ, come on in.
Yeah, the next class will be in the book of Isaiah. I've been studying hard for that for several months and got some lessons done. Uh, uh, what we're going to do is we're not going to go so much verse by verse in Isaiah, but we're looking at the holistic message. What is Isaiah trying to get across? So the few things to note: there will be assigned readings uh, that if you want to get the most of the class, you will read the uh, sections. We're gonna cover large chunks. We're gonna take 66 chapters and squish it down to 16 weeks. And so we're gonna make connections and zoom out and hopefully will impress upon ourselves the Holy One of Israel, because that's really the theme of Isaiah, that God is the Holy One of Israel that judges his people, chapters 1 through 39, and then comforts his people, chapters 40 to 66. I already got doubters. People like, yeah, we'll see if it'll be 16 weeks, DJ.
Right? You mean 16 going on 52?
Well, I may have to say lesson 1A, lesson 1B, lesson 1C.
I don't have a lot of room to speak, do I?
Yeah, this class is supposed to be done when, Levi?
January 1st.
That's right.
As I said, I don't have a lot of room to speak.
So I plan on this week making a promo for it, explaining more, and but I'm excited. I've been enjoying studying Isaiah, and I'm eager to share it with you all. That'll be Mondays at the 6:30 time slot.
I was just going to ask. So, all right, tune in next week at 6:30 Monday evening, Eastern Standard Time, to see the Holy One of Israel as we study to show ourselves approved. Thank you all for being here for our entirety of Beginning at the Beginning, Lessons from Genesis. And as you go through your day, won't you please study to show yourselves approved? I'll see you then. God bless in your walk with Him. I love you all, and good night.